The time has come to change the leadership of the European Union, and Slovakia could be the one to speak up about the problem. Must know that I openly protested against the nomination of former Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas as the so-called European Minister of Foreign Affairs, voted in the European Parliament for the removal of the President of the European Commission, Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen. The American Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, repeatedly refuses to meet with Kaja Kallas, let alone have a constructive debate with her. What purpose does her service serve? Where we should take inspiration from American President Donald Trump and his uncompromising stance on illegal migrants.
Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico has launched a scathing attack on the European Union's leadership, questioning its credibility, authority, and ability to function as a serious diplomatic force on the world stage. In some of his strongest language yet, Fico said Brussels is no longer acting like a geopolitical power, instead dismissing the European Union as a massage parlor, a place where, in his words, people talk, but nothing meaningful gets done. Fico openly questioned the role of EU foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas, casting doubt on her ability to represent Europe internationally.
Good evening, dear friends. Once again, I'm sitting on a plane, this time to Brussels. Some might even be envious, but believe me, there's nothing to envy. The President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, has called an extraordinary meeting of the European Council to calm the panic of some member states, but at the same time, without us making any decisions or knowing when we'll finish. Simply put, a super expensive dinner in Brussels. If I take into account the costs of the government plane and an unprepared summit, I would have 100 reasons to refuse such international improvisation. But if I didn't go to Brussels, then all the opposition experts in Slovakia would lose their minds, saying that I'm ignoring Brussels. Yes, generally speaking, we shouldn't ignore Brussels. However, we also shouldn't be victims of the European Union's leadership incompetence. I smiled when I read Dag Danish's commentary on Markary. I quote, "The time has come to change the leadership of the European Union, and Slovakia could be the one to speak up about the problem." I understand that it's hard for the media to admit that Smur or I are right, but Dag Danish, as one of the few renowned commentators, must know that I openly protested against the nomination of former Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas as the so-called European Minister of Foreign Affairs, and that recently, at the beginning of January this year, I publicly called for her replacement. I also appreciate the votes of the MEPs from Smer, Slovak Social Democracy, who have repeatedly, if I'm not mistaken, for the fourth time, voted in the European Parliament for the removal of the President of the European Commission, Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen. Dear friends, I am for the European Union. I appreciate the positive impact that Slovakia's membership in the European Union has had on our development so far. But that cannot mean that we will be pro-Brussels and hesitant, as we see with the current anti-Slovak and purely pro-Brussels opposition. We cannot have people in the leadership of the European Union whom the world's key players do not meet with and do not even have good-natured arguments with. If the American Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, repeatedly refuses to meet with Kaja Kallas, let alone have a constructive debate with her, what purpose does her service serve? We can only emerge from the deep crisis in which the EU finds itself with new leadership and new ideas. Three things are bringing us down. Because of excessive climate goals, we are unable to compete with China or the global south. We are unable to handle illegal migration, where we should take inspiration from American President Donald Trump and his uncompromising stance on illegal migrants. And we lack the courage to express our own opinion on fundamental foreign policy issues. The current leadership of the European Union offers no answers to any of these critical questions, and therefore it should be replaced. This is not an angry or personal remark. It is a political reality. Dear friends, the only thing guiding the Union is hatred towards the Russian Federation. From the position of Slovakia, which is neither large nor strong, I will fight for a strong European Union. A union that will be both strong and just. A union that will be able to express its opinion sovereignly, just as we do in Slovakia. So, dear friends, the same thing applies to the European Union as to a massage parlor. If it's not doing well, it's not enough to change the beds. You need to change the staff. I hope we won't be sitting here until morning again. To mitigate the catastrophic impact of today's unplanned and unprepared summit on my schedule, I have arranged, together with Finance Minister Ladislav Kamenetsky, a meeting tomorrow in Paris at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Europe, so that we can start a serious discussion with international experts about pro-growth decisions for Slovakia. This will probably be the biggest disappointment for the opposition kids who believe that even in 2026, we will be cleaning up after them in public finances with yet another round of consolidation. At the beginning of this government term, seeing the catastrophic state of public finances they left us, I told the anti-Slavic opposition and the media, if we're going to hell, then let it be on a big white horse. So, friends, it's a pre-election year, and I, along with my colleagues and friends in Smer, Slovak Social Democracy, believe in the white horse. I'm curious whether our coalition friends from Hlas and the Slovak National Party will join in, or if they'll continue riding the slow little donkey, safely leading these parties into deep opposition, perhaps even into oblivion.
According to Fico, his meeting with Donald Trump took place in an informal atmosphere marked by mutual respect and trust. Fico said he and Trump shared views on the European Union as an institution in decline, discussing competitiveness, migration, and energy policy. Talks also covered Ukraine, where Fico reiterated Slovakia's position that diplomacy and dialogue must take precedence over military solutions.
Dear friends, a sovereign Slavic foreign policy in all four directions of the world is bearing fruit. If we act confidently and constructively, and at the same time show an interest in peace and cooperation with anyone who is willing, no one will look down on us. If we freely express our opinions, we are welcomed as equal partners. It was in this spirit that my meeting with the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, took place. The meeting was also attended by the foreign ministers of the United States and Slovakia, Mark Rubio and Juraj Blanar. The meeting took place in the living room of the American president in his private home in Florida, which gave it a great degree of informality and openness. In diplomacy, this kind of meeting is seen as a sign of great respect and trust. After the official part of the meeting ended, the American president and the U.S. Secretary of State also greeted Deputy Prime Minister Denisa Sakovova and State Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Marek Eshtok informally. The subject of the lengthy discussion was a number of international topics, with a special focus on Ukraine, where the American representatives were interested in our positions, because they knew that we are not Brussels parrots, and that we have long expressed our own sovereign views on the war in Ukraine, based on our own understanding. It would be a waste of time now to repeat what I conveyed to American President Trump regarding Ukraine. All my positions are well known, and I repeat them in the same form at every meeting. In the context of other sensitive international events, I have clearly declared Slovakia's peaceful stance and the opinion that diplomacy and mutual listening must take precedence over military solutions. We also did not avoid evaluating the European Union, its competitiveness, energy, and migration policies, with complete agreement in viewing the Union as an institution in deep crisis. When taking stock of bilateral Slovak-American relations, the dominant fact was that we have no unresolved political issues. Quite naturally, we returned to the intergovernmental agreement on cooperation between the United States and Slovakia regarding the civil nuclear program. Both countries are fully aware that addressing serious energy challenges is not possible through wind turbines or photovoltaics, but that the key for the future is a rapid development of nuclear energy. To remind the American president of the unique historical and human connections, among other things, I gave him a Slovak postage stamp featuring the image of Michał Strank, a U.S. Marine of Slovak origin, born in the village of Jarabina in the Stara Ljubovania district. As the commander of a military unit in February 1945, he raised the American flag on the island of Iwo Jima as a symbol of victory over Japan.